Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. Listen, we've got another great guest for you. I'm talking about Emmy award-winning sports broadcaster, ESPN sideline reporter, author, keynote speaker, and someone who is known for her sideline shimmy. That's right, you heard me right. Her sideline shimmy. Talking about Lauren Sisler, and the question is she an Enneagram 2 or 3? And we start the conversation off today landing that plane. I think we landed that one. And then we get into her brand new book, which is an incredibly moving story, Shatterproof: How I Overcame the Shame of Losing My Parents to Opioid Addiction and Found My Sideline Shimmy. That's Lauren Sisler. We have her on the show today. She came with the goods today, folks. So good, rich conversation. I know you're going to love it. I'm so glad you're here. Hey, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, without any further ado, here is the host of the show, Ian Cron.
Enneagram 2 or maybe Enneagram 3. Lauren Sisler, welcome to Typology.
What is going on? I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to dig in because this has been like the $1 million question, trying to figure out where I am, who I am, what is this whole Enneagram thing? And I feel like I've had some maybe contradicting, resources, people that are kind of plugging me into different areas. But I think that you, Ian, and you, Anthony, both will be able to speak to this and maybe help us get to the bottom of it.
Right. Well, I'm super stoked.
I also want to say this before you say too much about your number. You have a friend who you said earlier tried to diagnose you and just recently had an experience with Ian. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I want to give a little shout out to my friend, Michaela D'Alessandro. And it's funny because Ian's got a good memory because he's like, I remember her name. It started with an M. And as soon as I said Michaela. So it's funny, you were at a conference out in California, the Garden City Conference, I believe. And it's funny because I was, she had told me that she was out there and heard you speak. I said, oh my gosh, like I'm literally going to be on his podcast. We're recording his podcast this week and I'm so excited about it, especially because I've been dying to dig into this Enneagram thing. And she's like, well, he may or may not remember me, but I'm the only one that raised my hand as the only 6 in the audience. I was like, that is amazing. And leave it to Michaela. Sweet, dear Michaela would be the only 6 in the audience. So, I feel like as she has tried to diagnose me over the past several years of our friendship, she's probably trending in the right direction, I'd say.
Well, she's probably in your neighborhood because it sounds like people have sort of suggested that you're possibly a 3 and others have suggested that you're a 2. And whenever I hear that, my first thought is, well, it's possible that they're a 3 with a strong 2 wing or a 2 with a strong 3 wing because those numbers are side by side versus if someone says, oh, they say I'm a 3 or they say I'm a 7, but 3 with a 2, 2 with a 3, that usually tells me that we're in your neighborhood, you know?
Well, and I will say that a 7 has come across the radar before as well. So that does exist. That has been pointed out to me. And so, it's one of those things like, I feel like you just get pulled and you're like, well, that sounds like me, but so does that. And so I'm so anxious to really just dig into this and figure out where we land.
All right. So let me ask you a couple of questions. So just to remind people who are listening, the Enneagram 2 is the helper and the 3 is the performer, sometimes called the achiever. And they can get confused on one level because both of them are very interpersonal, especially the 2, right? They're very relationship centered. They're very, they're in what we call the image conscious triad. So they tend to be people that deeply care about how they are perceived by others, right? In any given moment, but their core motivations and their fears and their behaviors, they actually differ significantly. So let me just go through maybe just a couple of questions and you tell me which one sounds more like you.
Okay.
All right.
Ready.
All right. So what drives you more in life? Is it the desire to be loved and needed or the desire to be admired and successful?
I definitely think it would be the desire to be admired and successful. I'm
Okay.
leaning in that direction. Now, I am a people pleaser, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that being a people pleaser also means that I've got to be like the leader. I've got to like drive the ship. I've got to sort of steer everything in a certain direction. And so I feel like that's kind of where I land on that,
Okay.
as the person that wants to ultimately please, but by doing so, doing it in a way that shows that I did it.
I'm awesome.
Yes. Awesome. Yes. Hey, call
All
a
right.
spade, and I got you, bud.
Yeah.
I got
Well, that's
you.
the thing about the Enneagram. Like the Enneagram is not a compliment machine, right? Like it's going
Right.
to tell you what's great about you and what's not great about you. If you want to compliment, go read Strengths Finders if you want just the sunny side, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do you fear being unworthy of love or being seen more, or which of these do you fear most? Being unworthy of love or being seen as a failure?
Okay, so I do struggle with this one because I will say the unworthy piece percolates a lot in my life. And I think that comes with value. And I definitely struggle with value, meaning what is my value? So when it comes to going out there and pitching myself, pitching a product, pitching my services, as a speaker or even my book, right? Like trying to get out there in front of people and, finding my value and my worth in that is a major struggle. So sometimes I feel like, am I worthy of being liked and or loved? Do I bring enough value? Do I bring enough to the table for someone to truly love me? But then on the other side of that is where I also feel that, I want to be, admired and loved for doing all the good things and the right things and the achiever in me, right, that comes out and certainly plays a big factor here.
All right, good. All right. You actually just gave me a clue. I'm going to circle back to it about your type and without knowing it, which is why this is fun. All right.
Okay.
Would you rather be known for your kindness and generosity or for your accomplishments and abilities?
Okay. I think that is where then I start to struggle because as I've tried to like determine which side of the spectrum I'm on here, what I struggle with the most is that I want to show kindness and generosity. And a lot of times, like I do it without even knowing what comes from the back end, the thank you, the being praised part of it. I actually get very clammy when people praise me and pay compliments. Like I tend to, shrink down, after a speaking event, people clap, yeah. And I'm just like, oh, like kind of melt down into a little ball. But then also on the other side of that is again where I struggle. And that's why I feel like I'm dipping toes in both sides of this thing. And that's why it's such a struggle.
So I'm going to make a forced choice on you here.
Okay.
I'm going to ask it again. And I just want you to tell me which of the two. Would you rather be known for your kindness and generosity or for your accomplishments and abilities?
Kindness and generosity. I'm going with it.
All right. Do you find yourself like constantly looking for ways to help and support others, even at your own expense? Or do you focus more on how others perceive your success and achievements?
I would say that I go to the ends of the earth to help others, to not hurt feelings. I say yes more than I need to, and therefore I'm telling others no, and or my family, the obligations that I have, because I'm so fearful that I'm going to terminate or hurt a relationship with someone because I said no. And so I end up saying yes to too many things when in reality I'm saying no to the most important things.
Right. Okay. So do you, I'm just trying to think of this. When someone praises you, right, do you feel most valued for your warmth and your care or for your skills and accomplishments?
I truly feel more valued for my warmth and care because of my ability to sit, to listen, to empathize with people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is a quality and skill set that I've been able to, foster over the years. And I think a lot of that is too some of the things that I've walked through and the experiences that have given me the ability to really empathize with people. So I would say that is something that is very strong for me.
Right. Yeah.
if I had to pinpoint one or the other.
Okay. Yeah. Which one was it?
The kindness and empathy piece.
Okay, you would rather be known for that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to just drill this down a little bit more, and then we're going to jump, because I got to get to your book. I'm so stoked to talk about your book.
I told you I'm a hot mess over here.
Yeah, no, we're going to unpack the mess. We're
y'all.
unpacking the mess. We're unpacking the mess.
Unpacking the mess.
Yeah. Are you good at adjusting your personality and self-preservation to fit what will make you most likable and needed, or what will make you look the most impressive and competent?
Liked and needed for sure.
Okay.
So I definitely can be, I feel like when I walk into a room, it's like this energetic ball of energy. I feed off of people. I feed off of what's going on. And then I can step into a conversation, and I feel like I work my way into a conversation in a way where I feel like I can interject my thoughts, my opinions based on what those people on the other end are going to say. Oh yeah. Thanks for understanding, Lauren. Oh yeah, I agree with you, Lauren. Whereas conflict, get out of my face. Can't do conflict whatsoever.
Interesting.
Literally shut down.
Okay. So I'm just going to make two statements. You tell me which one sounds more like you. I have a need to succeed, to appear successful to others, and avoid failure at all costs. That's one statement. The other statement is, I have a need to be liked, to be appreciated and loved. And sometimes I use meeting the needs of others as a strategy for winning approval.
Ooh. I'm gonna lean on the first one. I think the first one is where I tend to gravitate towards.
Okay, so you have more of a need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. Versus, I have a need to be liked, to be appreciated, and I sometimes will help other people in part because I want to be helpful, but also because I want their approval. So by meeting their needs, I'm kind of,
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to flip the script on that. As soon as approval, I think the approval stamp, I fear rejection. I need the approval. And I feel like, to me, that is how I dodge failure, is getting that approval.
Yeah. So
that's where I'm at. Does that make sense? I think so.
Yeah. All right. Anthony, should I keep going, or are we good?
I think we're good.
All right.
Anthony looks confident.
No, I'm not. So here's the thing. No, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. This is good for our people to hear, right? To delineate between 2 and 3. Okay. Like, do you struggle more with feeling unnoticed and underappreciated, or with feeling like you constantly have to prove your worth?
I feel it's often constantly having to prove my worth, and not just to the outside, but prove my worth to myself internally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Here's my thought. I could ask a ton more questions, right? This is my initial thought. I would argue that you are probably a 2 with an incredibly strong 3 wing.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by a wing?
Yes.
All right. So you're not a smack dab in the middle, clear bang 2. You know what I mean? Because you have a lot of 3 qualities.
Yeah.
But you identified with the core motivation of the 2 more than you did with the 3. The 3 is really driven by a need to succeed. And they're very image conscious. So you're a sports person, and you're old enough to know this person well. Andre Agassi was kind of the classic 3. You know what I mean? He just image was so important. He had to appear successul, in fact, he did that ad. Remember the ad, image is everything, where he's putting the glasses down and that stuff.
Yeah.
And you also have a lot of what I would call 2 energy. And the reason I just say that, observing you, 2s have this very cheerful kind of like they kind of radiate a kind of energy that to me feels like it's coming from you, you know, like this cheerful, bubbly, effervescent, effusive. You're very connected with me very, very quickly, as if we've been friends a long time. Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of vulnerability to you that all feel very 2-ish to me, you know?
Okay.
So I would recommend you actually go to my website and take the Typology Institute Enneagram assessment just to confirm it. And if you ever want to have a call with me just to go over the test, we can, if you have that level of interest. I don't presume you will, but if you did, I'm happy to do it.
And I will tell you, I've taken the test a few times, but in listening to other episodes, I feel like sometimes when people get pulled in the sort of not quite knowing, and maybe to your point, when you mentioned there's the good qualities and then the bad qualities, you try to talk yourself out of the bad qualities. So I feel like every time I do this, I'm like, well, wait a sec. Like, I don't know. And it's almost like you want to just like eliminate all the bad qualities, right? So I feel like I try to talk myself out into what I actually am. And so I think this is a great exercise. And, I mean, it just speaks so highly to obviously how we operate and function as human beings.
Yeah, it's super helpful to know, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, the only reason I'm a little suspicious about the proving your worth thing is that you're a woman in sports. Mm-hmm. My mom was a successful business executive at a time when women just weren't successful business executives. And she was always having to prove her worth, but it was more because of her gender than because of her type.
Yeah.
In her field, like it was like, oh, I got to go out there and prove it again. It's like, whereas for guys in her business, they just didn't have to work as hard at it, and I'm just making assumptions about your job that I don't know much about. In fact, you are on a show right now with one of the people in life who has little interest in sports. If you wanted to talk about music, I'm here all day long. I will say I watched the football. I did watch the, whatever you call that thing, the Super Bowl this past weekend. Yeah. And I got through 3 quarters and I was done.
Well, there's a good reason for that, because it was not a very eventful Super Bowl, unfortunately.
Not really.
And a lot of people tune in for the commercials anyways, but I think that's such an interesting point that you bring up, because I will say in the industry, right, I think that women in sports has become more widely accepted, and it's not as, whoa, that's an anomaly. But I will say that I still feel that I'm often combating the profiles that are kind of set against women. And I do often feel like I have to kind of prove myself, in the sense that nothing worse than like getting on an airplane, y'all, and literally I'm on there doing my notes, and the person next to me is kind of like creeping over my shoulder, and they're like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, are you game notes there? Are you going to cover a game? And I'm like, and I don't usually announce like what I do for a living unless it kind of the conversation takes us there. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then they'll start digging in. And finally, when I get to the part where I work for ESPN, then they ask me what role I'm in. And I eventually tell them, oh, I'm on the sidelines. I'm a sideline reporter. Oh, so you're the one that does the interviews. You're the one that's on TV. Well, of course they put a tall, blonde, attractive woman on the TV. Of course they put you on camera. Then that's when I'm just like, no, like
that's
this
insulting
is not
as heck.
what it's about, right?
Yeah.
So it's just funny, because those conversations actually come up more than you would think. And so I sometimes feel like I'm having to kind of break down the barrier and say, no, like I'm here. Look at me. I'm literally studying these notes. Like I'm not here to just show up and like look pretty and do a job. Yeah. Like I take heart to this. Like this is my job, but so much more than a job for me. And, something that, is really a mission for me, and telling stories and creating a ripple effect. And so it's you got to buck the trend sometimes.
The Enneagram is a powerful tool for improving relationships. Whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, understanding the people around you is critical to building better relationships. The Enneagram provides a framework for understanding different perspectives and communication styles. Imagine knowing why your colleague reacts defensively in meetings, or why your partner needs space when they're stressed. Understanding these dynamics helps you navigate relationships with more empathy, patience, and compassion. It's like having a cheat sheet for human behavior. Don't know your type? Well, find out today with my new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. So let's switch gears here. I want to talk about your book, and we'll continue to have some, I'm sure, Enneagram woven into it. So your new book is titled Shatterproof: How I Overcame the Shame of Losing My Parents to Opioid Addiction and Found My Sideline Shimmy. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty powerful subtitle. So I had a book drop this week on recovery, right? Called The Fix.
Yep.
And it's about how the 12 steps are this amazing path to transformation, not just for addicts and alcoholics, but for everybody. So I'm really deeply immersed in the world of addictionology and recovery. And I just knew we were going to have a really rich conversation, and it was going to be so good. So first, give us the backstory to the book.
So, Shatterproof, obviously, in the book world, coming up with a title can be very challenging. And really how we landed on that title was recognizing that in this world, there is good and evil. And unfortunately, we are all as humans going to fall on hard times. And oftentimes we feel like those hard times, we become irrevocably shattered, but recognize through love, through grace, through faith, through determination that we can pick up those pieces and create something beautiful. And really that's where the foundation of this story came from, because I unfortunately was faced with some extreme challenges when I was a freshman at Rutgers, living the dream, competing as a collegiate gymnast, something I dreamed of my entire young life. And it was something I dedicated a lot of time, a lot of hours to, and not just me, but my parents, my mom, my dad, and I had an older brother, Alan, as well. And, it just became my life. And I am here, going to college, going to Rutgers, living the dream. And one evening on March 24th of 2003, I get woken up to a phone call from my father to let me know that my mom had died. And it came as a complete shock because I had just talked to my parents a few hours before that. We had a great conversation. My dad had just celebrated his 52nd birthday. We're talking about gymnastics. Everything seemed fine. My dad said, Lauren, get on the next plane you can, and I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And unfortunately, he never did show up that day. And instead, it was my cousin, Justin, and my uncle Mike, who showed up at the airport to let me know that my dad, too, had passed away.
Good night.
It was, as you can imagine, sitting in the backseat of that car, getting that news as we're pulling out of the airport was just gut-wrenching, shocking, devastating, because these are two people that literally were just ingrained in every corner of my life. The unconditional, were they perfect? No, but just the unconditional love, just the guidance, constant cheerleaders in my life and my brother's life. And just to get this news so suddenly was so hard. And truth be told, as I'm sitting in the backseat of the car, hearing this news, what I didn't realize is it would take not just months, but years before I would truly come not just to terms, but seek out the truth of what happened that day to both of them, because I was so afraid of the shame, the fear, the judgment, everything that was associated with their passing.
And they both died from opioid overdoses, or was there fentanyl in the opioid?
Yeah, so both of my parents were going to a pain management doctor. My mom had degenerative disc disease, and my father had chronic back pain, also served time in the military, had some issues with PTSD. So they were going to this pain management doctor, doing everything what seemingly was by the book. And over the course of about 3 to 4 years, their prescriptions, they started to take more and more. Eventually, my mom couldn't manage the OxyContin, so she was then prescribed the fentanyl patch. And eventually, it was a 72-hour time release. And then eventually, the doctor said, well, that's not working anymore. Let's drop it to 48 hours. And you just see this spiral. But the problem is that was all happening behind closed doors. And me as the 17, 18-year-old living in the house with them, had no idea this was going on because they were so good at sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good at it. And so much so that my dad actually overdosed at Thanksgiving when I was home from Rutgers that first semester, and literally went back to Rutgers being told, your dad had a bad reaction to medication. So 18-year-old me thought that was, cholesterol, blood pressure. So we go home, we eat Thanksgiving dinner. Thank goodness, praise the good Lord, my father's okay. I go back to school, living life. Things go back to normal. They come visit me in February for my first gymnastics competition at Rutgers. And then that was the last time I would see them. And it just came as an absolute shock to me, to my brother, to everybody else in our family.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I want to talk to you a little bit about shame and your experience of shame. And I just want to remind everybody here, we need to, this is something I'm really passionate about. We need to destigmatize conversations around addiction. And we need to normalize conversations around it. Because addiction is, as Brené Brown recently observed, right? We are the most addicted cohort in the history of the world.
Oof,
and an addiction is yes, it's a physiological condition. Yes, it's but I think it's principally a spiritual malady. Mm-hmm. And I think the solution ultimately is spiritual, along with good psychological support, among other things, right? But shame plays such a role in it, not just for the person who has an addiction, but for those who are around them. So tell me about your experience of shame.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly, you hit it right there, because that shame transferred over to me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so society for so many years growing up told me what addiction was, what it looked like. It threw labels, cast labels on different people. And I felt like my parents were none of those things. Now, my father did struggle with alcoholism as well. So as a 10-year-old, I'm witnessing, his weekend benders, hearing my mom, hey, you need to get back to your AA meetings. And then I would compartmentalize it, stick it on a shelf, and that was it. Never think anything of it until 6 months would pass and the same thing would happen. Mm-hmm. And, for me, I think number one, being the athlete that I was, compartmentalization became my biggest tool, being able to just, move on from, every mistake that you make in gymnastics, every, failure, every fall. And I was doing the same thing. Little did I know in my life with my family and turning away from what was right there in front of me. And so addiction was something that society tells you is bad. It's a character flaw. Somebody that has an addiction is not worthy and uneducated, dysfunctional, all the things that I felt like my parents weren't. So I did everything I could to turn away from it. So when they passed away, and it was from addiction because they physically took the drugs that they were prescribed, put them in the freezer, and altered the way it was taken in order to get that immediate high that they needed to function. Mm-hmm. I said, there's no way my parents are capable of making such a decision. And there's no way that their name can be tied to drugs or overdose. And so that's why I tried to flip the script and do everything I could. I literally ran with this story. Mom died of respiratory failure. Dad died of a heart attack, because y'all, that sounds so much better than overdose, right? So I ran with that for so many years that I literally got to the point where I started believing it myself. Mm-hmm. And it was because of that shame that I felt, knowing that they had ultimately been taken down by something so powerful, but also something that society tells us is so shameful. Mm-hmm. And then I inherited that same shame. Y'all, I would go for job interviews and be terrified because there were little news clippings and articles out there about how they died. And I was terrified that people were going to do a good old Google search and find out Lauren Sisler's parents died of overdose. And that then I was now put in a category. I was now labeled, and that I now would be maybe overlooked or not qualified for a job because, you know what? She's a byproduct of that. So maybe she's not equipped and or qualified for this job. Maybe she'll fall into those same addictive behaviors. And it was just the thing, I literally sabotaging myself, right? Constantly, because I just could not get past the fact that my parents were addicts and that's what ultimately took them down. That wasn't our story. That wasn't supposed to be our story.
You're right. And it's so hard too, because, 2s, 3s, and 4s are in what's called the shame triad. Ooh. And so shame is already an issue for 2s, 3s, and 4s. Like I think they're more acutely attuned to it as a felt experience in their bodies. And it's like, you have this experience, and I would imagine too, if you are a two, that maybe one of the things you began to think of is like, why did I miss this? How could I not have stopped it? How could I have, where was I why couldn't I save them?
Every bit of my being has gone down that trail. The
Mm-hmm.
what ifs and the thinking, why didn't I see this? And I even think about that day that my dad overdosed and say, why did I not ask more questions? And especially now, it's easy in hindsight when I'm a professional storyteller and a professional question asker. Questions are easy for me now. But
Mm-hmm.
back then, it was so hard to have that conversation because I wanted to believe that my dad was okay, that everything was okay, that my family was okay, my parents are invincible, and that they were going to figure it out. And they didn't need my help to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have you, as a spiritually speaking, emotionally and psychologically speaking, how have you processed, and to what extent have you overcome shame?
I think the biggest thing for me is, number one, letting go of control, right? What I've discovered. Now, I will tell you, we were a church-going family growing up. I was very strong in my faith, and I really leaned into the poem, Footprints in the Sand, known by many. It was then that I carried you. And yet, when my parents passed away, when I was walking through the darkest days of my life, I didn't stop believing, but I kind of did the whole lean out thing. I'm gonna lean out instead of leaning in. And so what I've had to discover and the amount of work that I've had to do, and let's be real here, this has taken a lot of work, right? This happened almost 22 years ago, 23 years ago, I guess 22 years ago. And I've had to do so much work to get to where I am, to be able to unravel some of that shame that I've felt. But what I've realized in my walk in faith is God does not promise to deliver us from hardships. He promises to deliver us through hardships. And I think for such a big portion of my life, I felt that invincibility. I don't belong here. I'm not deserving of this. This can't happen to my family. We've got it all figured out. And yet it does happen. And so where I really kind of came full circle in that shame piece is I'm literally being tasked as a sports reporter to go out and tell stories. And one of the key words as a reporter is integrity, having integrity to be able to share stories, to share information. I'm being asked to go do that, to be the voice for someone else and their story. And then, oh, by the way, I share a story and I see this unbelievable ripple effect, right? The young man that's overcome such challenges in his life and the outpouring of support for him and what that story has done to impact other people. And yet I couldn't share my own story. And it's like, wait a second. And I use the word exonerated because I truly feel like when I was courageous enough to own my story, share my story openly, share my parents' story openly, those shackles of shame really just burst. And I felt exonerated because I felt imprisoned by my shame for so many years. And I can only imagine, Ian, as individuals that walk through, addiction, whether it's substance use or whatever it is. And I know you've had conversations about, the addictions being, in so many different forms, and that really all of us as humans walk down that path. But with specifically substance use, the shame that I inherited, and yet I wasn't, I'm not even the one taking the substance or relying on the substance, but I wanted to present myself as the polished, came from a great family, got it all figured out, and that I could do no wrong and that I could be seen as the Lauren Sisler everybody knew me as on the outside.
Yep. Yeah. And I would imagine, well, first of all, let me just say, good on you for the courage to write the book, right? To tell the story. Because the one thing shame hates is for you to come out of the shadows and tell the story. Because that is such a big part of overcoming shame. That's why 12-step groups are so awesome. Like I wish everybody upstairs in the church could go down into the basement where everyone's having 12-step meetings and could actually experience what everyone's getting down there.
Yes.
Because part of the juice of what's going on down there is people are just talking about their brokenness openly, but in the context of a community that's all about the solution, not the problem. So we're not just sitting down here wallowing, right? It's like, yeah, but we got a solution and we got tools and, and we can actually become a better version of ourselves. We can tell a different story than the one we told before. Right.
I mean, and I think you just nailed it right there, right? Because I think that a lot of times people kind of box themselves in and say, well, that's not for me. Like, I don't need that type of treatment or therapy or, kumbaya, right?
Right.
But the realization is people in recovery to me are some of the strongest people I know on this planet. And I think having walked through the experiences they've walked through, doing the work, and the work never stops. And that type of work is something. Now, let me preface it by also saying not everybody's cut out for it, right? And sometimes it's hard for people to pack up their bags and move through the grit and the grime and the dirt, because a lot of people want to unpack their bags and just hang out right where they're at, where it's comfortable, and not put in the work to do it. But if people could reflect on that and see that work that's being done, going to the basement of the church, I think that analogy is beautiful. Get down in the basement, y'all. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's been the message of my new book and all my speaking is like,
amazing.
Hey, y'all, you are really missing out on something great that you could experience the same benefits that alcoholics and addicts and people with food issues and workaholics, you all could benefit from working these steps, So has your therapist spoken to you about codependency?
Ooh, yes, a lot. Codependency is like the word that's just like
emoji head blow up. Yes.
Like smashed against my head. Because, and I think a lot of that, right? Codependency enmeshment is such a big, topic here, because I think in so many ways, I have lived my life thinking, and this is not even just with my parents, but like just in life, that I have the ability to like literally derail someone's whole day because I tell them no. And my therapist is like, who are you to think that like you telling someone no is just going to blow up their whole day and they're going to just like desert you and leave you? And that's where I think I get caught up in like the people pleasing, and then also the abandonment. Abandonment, I think, is my biggest key issue. And so maybe that probably plays into, my Enneagram as well.
See, I was thinking to myself as you were talking, you're slightly complicated. Everyone's complicated, but you could be, part of me was thinking as we were doing this Enneagram quizzy thing, like I was thinking, well, she could be a 3 with codependency, which would make her very 2-ish, like needing to people please, not knowing how to say no.
Yeah.
Always, that. So see, codependency is a tricky little creature. Like just because you're anxious doesn't make you a 6.
Yeah.
Like you could be a 2 with a generalized anxiety disorder and sound a little 6-y, but that's why when newbies are out kind of diagnosing other people's types, I'm like, oh man, you just don't know enough. Like, don't do that. And like, even I don't do that. I'll just suggest maybe you ought to think more about it.
You probably got a sense at the top of the show. I'm over here like fumbling over myself because I feel like I'm so indecisive because I'm like, well, I'm that, but maybe I'm that. I don't really know. Like, so how do you truly, Ian, because I do feel like, again, in many ways with the Enneagram, like you've got all these characteristics and it's almost so easy to like talk yourself in and out of something. So how do you truly like dig into that and know like that it's not smoke and mirrors, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, first of all, I'm going to answer that question, but before we skip codependency, because I think it's such a big topic, I wish I look like any type on the Enneagram can be codependent, right? Like now, originally what that word meant in the world of psychology, right, was it's a relationship addiction, right? And it takes place when one person believes it's their job to kind of save another person by attending to all of their needs, right? And so a codependent person like builds their identity around this purpose and around this other person. And in the process, they abandon themselves and take on this self-sacrificial role in the relationship, right? And it used to be, when it first came out, it was describing a relationship between a person and someone suffering from an addiction. So let's say your kid was an addict or an alcoholic, and you now have like taken on this role of saving them. and you're enabling them, and you're paying their rent, and you're, bailing them out of jail, or you're what I mean? And you're being resentful, and you love and hate them at the same time because of all you're doing for them, and they're not responding, and blah, blah, blah. But then we've broadened the definition of codependency into like more of what you're describing, right? But I'm wondering, have you ever been to an Al-Anon or an ACOA meeting, Adult Children of Alcoholics meeting?
I have, yes. I've actually been to several Al-Anon meetings. I've been to a couple AA meetings as well. But
awesome.
I actually, wanted to spend a little time just learning more, digging deeper. But I have gone to Al-Anon meetings before as well, just to better understand it. And I think that has been, again, another process of understanding that codependency. Because I will say that, that word codependency has percolated a lot in my life because of my fear of, if I don't do this, this person could die. This person could leave me. This person could abandon me. And so that I literally stretch to the ends of the earth to not be rejected, to do all the right things. So every time that I say yes, I feel like that should count for something. And truth be told, it's out of my control.
Amen. So this is what twos need to hear. Because the 2 numbers on the Enneagram, in my experience, like I said, any type could be codependent, right? But the 2 numbers that struggle typically with it more than other types are 2s and 9s. And so for a 2, like, here's the deal. 2s don't believe they can be loved for who they are, but only for what they can do for others. By meeting the needs of others, pleasing others, right? And then those others feed their sort of insatiable thirst for approval.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that ring true for you?
Yeah. I think that definitely hits, because I think the approval piece, obviously. So you're saying the approval is still within the 2.
Yeah. Like 2s have a deep need for approval.
Yes.
Whereas a 3 has more of a need for admiration. Do you see the difference?
Yes. Yep.
Like a 3 wants to be admired. Like a 3 wants others to notice them for their accomplishments and their competencies and their productivity and their efficiency and, getting the job done and being number 1 and always winning, right? Whereas the 2 is more like, I want to be approved. I want to be validated. I want to be appreciated.
Yes.
For what I do for others. I want, right? And that, do you see how that naturally leans into codependency already?
Yeah.
Like it's already like you're all kind of like already in terms of your personality set up for codependency. It's like, it's an easy draw for the 2.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of what was behind that question. Ian asked earlier, do you sometimes meet your own needs by meeting others, basically?
Yes.
That's a character trait of the 2.
Because I get validation when someone else, and I don't necessarily need the thank yous, but when I see the look on someone's face, when I do something kind to them, or when, even just giving a gift, like I could care, don't give it to me in return. But when I see the look of surprise and like, oh my gosh, but when you get that, like, maybe like, oh, thank you. Like, then I feel like it lacks like the approval. Like, oh, I didn't do it right. I didn't do it right. Oh, I didn't get the right thing. I mean, and talk about indecisive. Like, I will literally go to the ends of the earth. Like, my husband, John, is literally watching me like on Amazon trying to pick out a phone case. And he's like, Lauren, you just spent 45 minutes picking out a phone case. Like you just wasted so much time doing that, because my indecisiveness, and then questioning, like, is this the right thing? Is the wrong thing? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? But then there lies in the codependency piece of, I truly feel that I am in full control of if someone likes me or doesn't like me, someone approves of me or doesn't approve of me. And like one misstep and it's, game over.
So, yeah. And I love, you said something earlier that really rang true for me, which is, this is true for everybody, right? But this is particularly something a message 2s need to hear. Like, you can't control other people's experience of you. And you are not responsible to take care of anybody else except you, like ultimately responsible. Now, you can care. There's like such a difference between caring for someone and caring about someone.
Yeah.
I think we're all called to care about each other, but not for each other.
Oh, that's
does
so
that
good. Yes.
does that make sense? Like
good.
I can't, I have to give other people the dignity of making their own choices.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I might think the choice they're making isn't a great one, it's like, well, so my wife is an Al-Anon ninja, I like to say. And she goes to Al-Anon and seriously, we have these moments like, I'll be in the kitchen and I'll be complaining about something and she'll look at me and she'll just go, keep coming back. Like that, which is like an Al-Anon kind of like
yes.
AA saying, keep coming back,
Yep.
But, she learned it with me and my son, but particularly with him, like, hey, I can't fix you. Like that's a you job. That's not a me job. And she talks about like when I'm like trying to maybe periodically get too involved or enmeshed in someone else's life or problems, which I can do as a therapist, right? And she'll be like, stay in your hula hoop. And I'll be like, what? She said, yeah, just imagine a hula hoop. Like you're standing in a hula hoop and everybody else is standing in their own hula hoop. Like stay in your own hula hoop.
Yeah.
And that's so something good. Twos need to hear. Stay in your own hula hoop. Stop jumping into other people's hula hoops and trying to meet their needs and be people pleasing and never saying no. And, that's like leaving your hula hoop. Like just take care of yourself and be there for others. I'm not saying, and sometimes in relationships we have to care for others, but you have to be very, very careful on how and when you do it. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I think that's such an important point to make because I do feel like I get myself spread so thin because I care so deeply to make others happy, content. And I will say this, and let me
make them. Listen to what you just said. I try to make them happy. Like that's an amazing two statement right there. I try to make them happy. I will make you happy.
Ding, ding, ding.
And it's deceptive too, right? Because the two, you say this often, Ian, when you're sort of quizzing someone, do you kind of know, like if you wanted to, you could make someone like you? Like you could walk into, and the twos do have that kind of superpower.
It's a superpower.
It lends to you ultimately thinking, oh, if I can make you like me right now, I can make you do all kinds of things.
Well, and I will say there's got to be something to that, the whole energy thing you talk about, like walking into a room. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to go unnoticed. And part of that's just because I'm loud. I have an obnoxious laugh. The sideline shimmy, dancing on the sidelines, like it's just kind of how I operate. But I have a question too. And I know I'm curious because I feel like this kind of ties in to some degree and maybe this is a little diagnosis, but one thing that I've been leaning into with my therapist specifically is, where does this come from, right? Where does this need to people please and to help others not feel disappointment? And I will say that throughout my lifetime, when my parents were here, it was rare that me and my brother truly felt the weight of disappointment because I feel like they were often there to catch our fall, right? So like, obviously as a kid, I'm disappointed. I fell off the balance beam. I messed this up. I did that. But ultimately, even in a bad gymnastics practice, hey, you know what? You had a tough day, Lauren. Let's go get you some ice cream. And I feel like a lot of times the weight of disappointment was never truly felt. The magnitude of it for me and my brother, the consequences of our behaviors, like the one time I got grounded, I talked myself out of it because my dad was so sick and tired of hearing me beg him to get me off the hook that he's like, just go to the pool. I'm tired of hearing about it. Right. And so I sometimes think that I do everything I can to catch everybody else's fall because I didn't want to experience the disappointment and I don't want them to experience it either.
Yeah. There you are, taking care of other people's feelings again.
Yep.
Right?
Rocking my baby.
Rocking my baby, yeah. So I'm gonna read you a statement that someone said to me the other day, and I was thinking about, I grew up in this alcoholic, drug-addicted home, and it also was something that, people in our community knew my dad was an alcoholic, but we still grew up in that kind of a privileged world of Greenwich, Connecticut. But, he was, just a very unwell person, right? And they said something that just at my age, and after all the work I've done, I found deeply stirring. And I'm going to say it to you, and you can tell me where you are on the journey of being able to agree with this. They said this: I've learned to love the one thing I wish had never happened to me.
Ooh.
And I went, what? And they said, I've learned to love the one thing that I wish never happened to me. Now, I think about, for me, like growing up with an alcoholic dad and just the pain of that, right? And it's taken me a minute. It's taken me decades of hard work to go, you know what? I can see where I'm pretty close to that now, because it has made me who I am, and it gave me the ability to care for people and to empathize. And it's the one thing I wish never happened to me. In a strange way, I've learned to anyway, tell me what you think about that statement.
Well, as I choke back the tears here, that's a lot. I do feel like for many years I've fought this thing, right? Being robbed of the milestones that I felt like I deserved, that we as humans deserve, right? Graduating from college and my parents being there, my parents walking me down the aisle, my parents here to see their grandson born.
Mm-hmm.
In so many ways, I've experienced, so much regret in that he'll never meet his grandparents. He'll never know who they were. All those milestones, even when I go out on the football field and do my job, as a reporter, I sometimes think about, well, I wonder what it would be like if my mom were calling me right now to tell me how pretty I look today, or, you think about those things, but I literally also go exactly where you're taking me in this conversation of what would my life be like if they still were here, and how I have come to such an appreciation and gratitude. It's often said in the world of sports, I hear it often, and I know Ian, Mr. Not Sports guy.
I know. Okay, so please educate me.
The coaches often talk about, and you hear this from so many coaches, and the first coach I ever heard say it was Nick Saban. You know who he is, right, Ian?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
A time or two. Anthony, you know who he is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the first time I heard it, and it really actually became sort of a foundation and a key takeaway from my book is that being where your feet are. Be where your feet are, because I truly believe that in so many ways, my life, after my parents passed, I spent so much time running from reality, that finally when I was able to stop and recognize that, my parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. That was something my Auntie Linda, my mom's sister, really helped me to unpack over the years, amongst several others, in my support system. When I finally was able to just stop and breathe and be in this moment, I can tell you now, and especially being an adult, being, 40 years old, I have a 19-month-old son. I still have a lot of life left to live. And it's crazy because I even think about it being 40. My mom was 45 when she died. And back when she died, I thought, well, that's not young. That's not old. But I'm 5 years removed from that. I've got so much life left to live, but I don't want to live it running. I don't want to run anymore. And so trying to find myself and kind of plant my feet where I am at has been so important. And I truly believe walking through the experiences and everything, the path that has been mapped out for me by the good Lord above has truly been so powerful to be able to walk through that. And I don't want to say I feel sorry for people that don't walk through challenges, but I do truly believe that we are shaped by the challenges that we're confronted with in our life, and that you have a choice with how you want to respond to those challenges. And ultimately, I feel much like you, Ian, that I could have gone one of two ways with this thing. And I am darn grateful that I have gone in this direction and taken this course to be a voice, to be an advocate, and to really step out there and courageously share my story and use it to help and empower others to fall in love with theirs.
Yeah. Okay. So this is so beautiful. And I'm going to make another statement. And you tell me how this responds to you. You can't change what happened to you, but you can change the meaning that you assign to it. Right?
So good.
So when I was a young man, I looked at my father's alcoholism and I thought, let's say my early teens and 20s, right? I would have been like, it's because I wasn't a good enough son. So I was assigning meaning to that experience, right? Mm-hmm. And the meaning I assigned to it was, it's all my fault, right? If I'd been a better kid, if I'd been this, if I'd blah, 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 he wouldn't have needed to do that, right? Drink and all that stuff. And then as you get older and you realize, oh, I have agency here. I have the freedom and actually the obligation to assign meaning to the experience I had. And I get to choose what that meaning is. How does that? Oh, I'm just giving you. Oh, you're getting good stuff from that.
I love it. Yes, I love it. Like I'm sitting here. Ooh, like I'm glad this is recorded because I'm gonna go back and taking some notes. My notebook, affirmation.
Are you shimmying right now? I just want
to.
That makes my day.
On my mirror, it's gonna be up there front and center. I mean, literally, like, just being able to assign meaning, because again, you can either go the route of, you always hear the victim card, right? And I really do think for so many years, I kind of ran from that shame because, everyone told me you're the overcomer. You went through so much, Lauren, you're so strong. So guess what? I felt like I had to, on the outside, continue with that appearance. But on the inside, I was literally just drowning and suffocating and like, oh my gosh, I can't get to the surface fast enough. But then when I finally just let go of that, and when I say like, just the freedom I have felt in the last decade or so from truly stepping into the reality of my life and the meaning, assigning meaning to those situations, circumstances, challenges that I've been faced with. Because I think oftentimes people so much, nobody should ever go through what you've gone through in a lifetime. But like, yeah, but at the same time, I feel like also, you can always look at it. I don't like the whole comparison thing, like comparing my tragedy with your tragedy, right? Your experience is your experience. My experience, whether you've lost a hamster or, you've gone bankrupt and lost it all. Like your experience is your experience. But I think that's the key, right? Because I get people that always, after an event or whatever, they'll come up and, oh, well, my story is not as sad or as tragic as yours. And I said, no. I love how you have positioned that, because it's all how you assign meaning to it. Whatever the challenge is, whatever the loss, whatever the grief, whatever the grief is, whatever the choices that you've made, because you can make like the absolute worst choice in your life. You've made a decision that literally has redirected your entire path. But, I truly believe setbacks aren't the end of the story. They're the turning point.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, that turning point is now how you assign meaning to it. Oh, we are getting somewhere, my friend.
So, we got to wrap up, but I love, this conversation could go on and on, but I like oftentimes in my own life now, like when I talk about my own experience of addiction, I used to talk about it as failure, but now I'm often talking about it as seeming failure, right? Like we have seeming failures, right? Like they seem like failures, but then a couple of years later, you realize, oh, wait a minute. This turned out not to be a failure. Like it turned, or maybe it was, and then it evolved into something beautiful, right? Like into something I didn't know was coming as a result, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, everybody listen to me. We're all talking to my new best friend, Lauren Sisler, and we're talking about her beautiful book, Shatterproof: How I Overcame the Shame of Losing My Parents to Opioid Addiction and Found My Sideline Shimmy. I got to watch a game now to see this sideline shimmy. But Anthony's going to have to tell me when to do it.
Oh, it's out there. Just hit up the old Instagram.
Should I hit the YouTube? The YouTube?
Yeah, the YouTube. It's on YouTube too. You'll find it out there. I think I've coined the phrase, And it's been very therapeutic for me. You know, the sideline shimmy was not just an attention grab. It really was because I used to get so nervous getting on TV that I had to move my body, or else I was literally like with the microphone, like, oh, I can't talk. I can't speak. So it was a grounding exercise for me. Little did I know. And then, here I am.
Okay. Last question. What would you tell someone who is on the journey of healing from loss that would be instructive and encouraging to them based on your own experience?
Whew. Okay. So loss is challenging because sometimes it's hard to articulate what loss is and how to fill the void and how to navigate that. And I will say, in my experience, I have been walking through a loss with my parents and unfortunately, most recently with my brother. So everything has come back full circle now, and the emotions of loss are very fresh for me. And I will say in a lot of ways, I thought I was, after losing my parents, a pro at this, a pro at grief, and I know how to navigate this. I know how to get through it. And then in losing my brother just 3 months ago, I realized that I was so far from the truth. It was just so silly to think that I could just navigate this thing and, figure it all out and be okay. So I am walking very deep right now in grief. And I think back then at the 18-year-old me was running away from it, running from the feelings, running from the emotions, running from the impact. And now the 40-year-old me is sitting here, and I've kind of used this illustration. I feel like I'm laying in the ocean as the waves kind of bob me up and down. And instead of trying to swim as far away from it all as possible, I'm just a buoy in the water, soaking in every bit of this and recognizing this grief is here. It's real, but I'm finding moments of clarity. And when I find those moments of clarity, I write it down, I take a note, and I feel like this canvas, this beautiful canvas is being painted as I navigate this journey of grief and loss. And I recognize that there will be brighter days on the other side. And that's one thing I do know for sure, because I've been on both sides of it now, at an extreme. And so I would just encourage people to recognize that, when you wake up and when you navigate a loss and you navigate that challenge, it's going to ebb and flow. And that loss is never going to truly go away. Mm-hmm. But what I've also realized is in that loss, the emotion that I feel for that loss, when those emotions come back to me, I look at them actually as a gift, because I feel like the heaviness of it, the weight of it, the tears, I look at it as a gift, because for me, it is so profound that I actually feel their love and their presence with me as the unforgotten people that they are. And so I will say this, y'all, it's been 22 years since I lost my parents, and I never recognized and realized that I could love my parents even more than I did when they left us. And that to me is so profound and such a gift. And so I would encourage people that are walking through loss. It hurts. It hurts like heck. But just know, as you continue to take that step every single day, you're going to come to the other side, and it's always going to hurt, but you're going to find those moments that become a gift that you're able to use for yourself and hopefully use for the joy and the good for others.
What a beautiful, beautiful place. And it is, your words are in and of themselves a kind of benediction. And so beautiful. Everybody, you got to go get Lauren Sisler's book, Shatterproof. Don't mess around. This book is really, really powerful. And Lauren, we're so honored that you came on. And I know that everybody knows where to find you, but I'm assuming that, is it laurensisler.com?
Yep. LaurenSisler.com, at Lauren Sisler.
What a surprise.
What'd you say?
I said, what a surprise.
What a surprise. At Lauren Sisler, if you want to slide on into the DMs and say hello, I'm here for it.
Awesome.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you guys so much. What a great conversation. Do you still categorize me as a hot mess?
No, you're not a hot mess. No, you're not in the category of hot mess. But you know what? Someone said to me something the other day, and Anthony, forgive me if I've said this before, and maybe this is a good way to go out in a way. Like, you know, this new book, The Fix, is really vulnerable about addiction and stuff. And I'm like, he said to me, he said, well, Ian, just remember, your mess is the message. And I was like, what did you say? He said, your mess is the message. And I'm like, I like that, you know, because our mess can be of benefit to others.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here, right? You are helping us unpack the Enneagram, the who, what, when, why, where of our being. And I love that so much. And I'm so glad that I got to dig in with one of the best around. So much fun. I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Anthony.
Thank you.
So appreciative. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks, everybody. And here are the words of the week. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Until next time.